Void Titans, I am happy to report that Sentinel Shield is actually pretty good now. Let's talk about Void. Bungie buffed Sentinel Shield in a big way with Renegades. Allies gain Void Overshield when behind the shield. Blocking attacks extends the super. Blocking attacks and protecting allies charges your shield throw damage, and standing behind the shield will auto-reload anyone behind it every 2.5 seconds, although that last one is actually coming in the next patch, which is 9501. The only negative here is that they reduced the damage bonus while behind the shield from 40% down to 25% to probably compensate for some of the changes, which I don't know if that needed to happen. Maybe it did. I don't know. What these changes have done have made Sentinel Shield last an incredibly long time, especially when combined with something like Doomfang Pauldron in the new Lawless Frontiers activity. It actually feels good and fun to try to protect my teammates for as long as I possibly can because of the incentives of being in this super. Those incentives being, I get to stay in my super for a really long time, and my shield throw is super juiced up and does a ton of damage if I block a ton of damage. That being said, you only get 2 maximum power shield throws per super. Like, you can only juice up the damage of the shield throw so much in a single super, which, okay, all right, fine, but I digress. Let's talk about the setup that I was first using. I opted for Doomfang instead of something like Ursa Furiosa or Second Chance, mainly because I thought it was the most well-rounded exotic for general play. Doomfang is a bit more offensively focused and allows you to have multiple methods of super energy regeneration while in your super, blocking or shield throws. You get to play both offense and defense, whereas Ursa is mainly a defense-based exotic, and Second Chance is built more for anti-barrier capabilities, of which I have seen none champions in Lawless Frontiers, because they're not there. I also find the base melee shield throw ability to be still a bit lackluster after having used it for several hours now. I liked my initial build setup, which is a more traditional Void setup, Bastion and Offensive Bulwark. It's all about overshields and then buffing myself while I have overshields. Offensive Bulwark gives me grenade regeneration, bonus melee range and damage, and another shield throw in Sentinel Shield. It just makes too much sense not to run this setup. You could run Unbreakable if you wanted to, but considering how often you should be in your super, you will not really need too much extra shielding. Controlled Demo could work here, but I just really wanted to lock in on the overshields. Fragment-wise, I didn't want to just go full into Devour, but I still gave myself the option to get it by picking up an Orb of Power. It's too easy to not give yourself the capability of having Devour when it's such a strong buff. Persistence also makes sense here given you're working with 2 buffs in Overshields and Devour. I went with Reprisal specifically for Lawless Frontiers. You are surrounded by combatants literally all of the time, so this is just going to push you closer to your super. That being said, this is easily flexed out if you want to run something else, or if you have the support renegade ability that just feeds you a ton of super energy. You do need to get it to level 7, I believe, so maximum rank in order for it to really feed you a lot of super energy, but when you do, you can have a super basically whenever you want. Then I went with Leeching for more support on melee kills, but I think this could be swapped out as well depending on how much you're sticking with your teammates. On GM difficulty, it gets harder and harder to get melee kills as time goes on in Lawless Frontiers, so you're not going to proc this very often as you get deeper in a run. You could throw in Vigilance, but I think you're going to be pretty set on Overshields. You could go Undermining since you'll have a good amount of grenade energy with Devour, and it does have some synergy with the artifact. A lot of these are pretty flexible. I would say definitely get Devour, probably get Persistence, and then the other 2 are kind of up to you. Stats-wise, Paragon Armor is perfect for the setup, super and melee stat. I'm sure you could try to finagle some other kind of setup if you really wanted to, but it's just really easy to tell people, just grab a bunch of Paragon Armor. If you plan on using a kinetic weapon or Praxic Blade, TechSec 2-piece set bonus is really good, and then if you collected any Smoke Jumper armor from last season, the 2-piece bonus on that is a nice match. In the artifact, you will obviously be taking the 3 Void perks. If you are using Praxic Blade, you should take as many Sword perks as possible as well. If you find yourself having Devour from the artifact, then you can rotate out that fragment in your subclass and replace it with something else. Mod-wise, I kept it really simple. Super energy gains in the helm, ability regen in my gloves, chest resistances. I ignore Void Surge because we get a very similar effect from Doomfang, so just give yourself whatever you want here and then round out the class item with something like Time Dilation and maybe Reaper. Very flexible depending on what you want to do with your setup. The setup that I'm giving you right now is very, very basic. So what's the goal here? Get to your super, use your super, stay in your super for as long as you possibly can. That's it. And you can stay in the super for very long periods of time. You'll want to weave between offense and defense to restore your super meter while you're mid-super. That's really about it. Fortunately, with the amount of enemies that spawn in Lawless Frontiers, this should not be that much of a problem at all. And again, even if it is, you can just use that Renegade ability to feed you a super. Enemies actually hit pretty hard here. There's a lot of them, so you can play both sides of the coin very, very easily. And you can actually build up your big shield throw for major targets somewhat reasonably, so getting rid of big major targets can be very, very simple. All that being said, I do feel like this build excels the most in Lawless Frontiers or high density, high difficulty environments. I went into a solo ops at ultimate difficulty with no other adjustments, just the level difference, and yeah, not exactly the build I would be using personally in something like the Conflux solo ops. There's low density here, enemies are barely registering any damage on your wall, so your shield throws are just going to be very basic. I mean, it gets the job done, I guess, but there are so many other builds that I would rather run than this one in this kind of content. Part of the reason of why this excels in Lawless Frontiers is that the encounters in Lawless Frontiers are long. They last long enough that you can pop your super, have it last forever, come out of it, and the encounter's still going for like a while. As the enemy level increases, the value of your defense also increases, but inversely, your offensive power goes down a ton unless you are saving those shield throws for maximum damage. I tried this setup in Fireteam Ops, Arena Ops, and I don't really think it works everywhere. I think you do need to try to find good activities for it, and by good activities, I mean activities that don't take place in massive environments. Astral Alignment, for example, is kind of pushing it because everyone can be so spread out, and this setup excels when you can get a lot of things shooting at you. I think this is better in spaces that are a little more compact so that more of the attention can be focused on one specific area, hopefully you. 3-player content feels a bit better because there's just not as many people, but again, tighter spaces, more compact spaces are better. Also, the better your teammates are, the more this is going to lose value because your team is just killing everything instead of you blocking damage, although this has been a problem for several years now. Another thing too is that you are pretty awful against champions. You can't stun them in your super in pretty much any way, and your damage is not going to be good enough to really do anything to them, so you are going to need to rely on your teammates. When it comes to Ursa Furiosa versus Doomfang, like I said at the beginning, I think Doomfang offers the better value play for general gameplay. With Ursa, the main value you're getting out of it is being halfway to your next super when you come out of it. Like, you really gotta try to not be halfway to your next super when you're done with the Sentinel Shield using Ursa. So if your goal is to just be in a near permanent state of Sentinel Shield and you're really liking Ursa, I'm not gonna stop you. But you're only using about half of what that exotic can offer if you're not on Unbreakable, whereas on Doomfang, you're getting full value on many different effects. Second Chance, on the other hand, yes, I know it got buffed. I've heard pretty decent things about it. Void Breaches give melee energy, throws weaken targets. I get it, but ultimately, the fact that my basic melee shield throw will consistently still just hit a single target and then ricochet itself into Romania, never to be seen again, is a huge turnoff still. Yes, there is synergy with the artifact, with weakness and rapid kills. I understand. I just personally don't really like it that much for general gameplay. Shield Throw also falls off a cliff in terms of damage in the higher stages of Lawless Frontiers, so you're really just using it for Overshield, of which I already have plenty of. In a more traditional strike setting, it works a bit better, but I'm still not in a huge hurry to throw it on outside of pretty desperate anti-champion needs. When it comes to raiding, I have not gotten to test this out, so I'm not going to say like, yes, it's great, or no, it's terrible, but I can give some very quick theories. Obviously, Wyvern in Desert Perpetual is going to be a prime target for Sentinel Shield, and yes, I'm mainly going to be talking about Desert Perpetual. The boss is mobile, it's a Wyvern, so it's hitting super hard. This is a no-brainer place to use it, but only if you're unable to one-cycle this boss. If you can one-cycle with Sentinel Shield, then like more power to you. But if your Titan actually doing damage would enable a one cycle, you know, obviously I wouldn't use Sentinel Shield. The Hydra is able to be one cycled as well, although it tends to be somewhat close, at least on epic difficulty. My concern here is like missing the one cycle and then also figuring out how much value you're really bringing to the table. Yes, there's a ton of damage going out, so defensively there is value, but Well of Radiance can bring similar value without taking someone completely out of the fight for a while. If you're two cycling, I don't see why you couldn't have a Sentinel Shield, but I would also wonder what their damage phase would look like since Arc Titan on Peacekeepers and a couple of SMGs is putting out some absolutely ridiculous damage. Damage that a Sentinel Shield spec'd Titan will probably not match. Hobgoblin's probably a no, it's easy enough to one cycle, and while you do take some damage, Well of Radiance absolutely clears Sentinel Shield here. And then the final boss in both normal and epic is probably also a no. So there are some possibilities for use in raids, but if you can already one cycle a lot of bosses without Sentinel Shield, then, you know, just don't fix what isn't broken. You feel me? Anyway, that is what I have for you on Void Titan right now. It is really fun to play in Lawless Frontiers. Outside of Frontiers, though, I do have my concerns when it comes to how fun it actually is to run. It's absolutely viable in other pieces of content, but I do think you need to be a little more selective in where you use the setup if you want to have fun playing it. Let me know what kind of setups you've been running on Void Titan. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.